And how do we relate this to our IUM mission and mission? Okay, vision and mission. The training will enhance instructors' competency in pedagogical aspects. This is aligned with the fourth IUM mission statement, that is to nurture the quality of holistic excellence, which is imbued with Islamic moral spiritual values in the process of learning, teaching, research, consultancy, publication, administration, and student life. And the training outcomes, it will help the instructor in the end to help the students learn more effectively by providing them with opportunities to learn in ways that match their preferred learning style, increase student engagement and motivation by making learning more interesting and relevant to them, promote active learning by encouraging students to participate in activities that require them to think, process, and apply new information. And last one, differentiate instruction to meet the needs of all learners. So I'm going to stop now. I'm going to call Prof. Mira for her to give a short remark. Please, Prof.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So thank you so much, Dr. Raini and Sister Hilda for organizing the training. And of course, I would like to thank the speaker for today, Prof. Fauziah. Seems that maybe we have met in person sometimes in the magnetic and some other meetings at KPT. So it's so glad. I'm so thankful that you make your time and then spend your time with us to train all the academicians here on how to adapt with different learning styles. So we couldn't thank you enough, Prof. So we're grateful for these opportunities and we look forward to learn from you in the session. And to all participants, again, I would like to thank all of you. May Allah bless your courage to keep learning, because great teachers is the teachers who never stop learning. And I'm looking forward that all the knowledge that you have learned in these sessions would manifest into greater and more effective teaching and learning in the future. So again, I would like to thank everyone and may Allah bless our effort. All the best. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Prof. Mira. Okay, so now I would like to introduce our speaker. All right, our speaker today is Prof. Dr. Fauziah Binti Abdul Rahim. She is a professor of educational psychology at the School of Education in UMP, University Malaysia Pahang. She obtained Doctor of Philosophy in Educational Psychology in 2007, specialized in mediated learning from the University of Nottingham, UK. In 2003, Master of Education from the University of Malaya, Malaysia. 1997, Master of Arts, Language Studies from University of Lancaster, UK. And 1993, Bachelor of Education Honours, Teaching English as a Second Language from the University of Pertanian, Malaysia, UPM. Academically, the achievements and contributions obtained by Prof. Dr. Fauziah, appointed by Higher Education Leadership Academy, ACAP, to become the master trainer for 2 modules for the training of trainer for leaders in the National Institutional of Higher Learning, Malaysian Private and Public Institution of Learning, winner of the 12th Anugerah Academic Negara 2018 in the teaching category for Social Science and Applied Social Science. Panel of Anugerah Khas Reka Bentuk Curriculum and Inovasi National Award, Anugerah Khas Menteri Pendidikan, specifically became the head of jury for transformative teaching and alternative assessment category that involved with the institution of higher learning at the national level. For the community engagement, Prof. Dr. Fauziah became the neuroscience coordinator to 4 schools or clubs in Kubang, Pasu district, okay, coordinator for Zone A, North Zone, Malaysian and International Brain Week Championship, and this was an initiative to promote STEM-related activities in schools. MashaAllah, what a background, right? Very impressive. Before we can start, okay, don't forget 3 CTD points will be awarded to those who fill in the I-10, recorded in Zoom attendance for minimum of a certain duration, and fill in the evaluation form within 24 hours. And don't forget to prepare for the photos to be taken at the end of the training. Please welcome Prof. Dr. Fauziah Binti Abdul Rahim.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Raini, for the warm welcome. And thank you, everybody. And thank you, Prof. Mira. Yes, I think due to our pandemic situation, we were only able to see ourselves virtually, and we're still seeing each other virtually now. Hopefully one day we'll be able to see in person. I'm not really myself at the moment, or maybe I'm under the weather. So I don't, how shall I say? I don't think I will be able to be my jovial self as much as I would like to, but I will try my level best because I like what Prof. Mira said just now. I think excellent teachers are those who are passionate and those who take the trouble to improve themselves for the sake of their learners. And because that's an amanah that's given to them to help nurture the future leaders. So I'll try my level best, yeah? As you can hear, my voice is like pricking out. Okay, let me, allow me to share. Are you able to see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. If I do that, that's fine, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for the response. I'm Fauziah Abdul Rahim. I'm from University Utara Malaysia, from the School of Education. And what based on what Dr. Raini has showed, my previous background, my qualification, basically, I stumbled upon, or maybe I stumbled upon, the idea of becoming one of the, how should I say, pioneer to establish a School of Education in University Utara Malaysia. So before University Utara Malaysia had a School of Education, I was teaching language, and then we decided to have a School of Education. That's how I ended. Well, I volunteered and ended myself becoming someone who's from the educational psychology, where my PhD was basically about learning, specifically mediating learning. So today, what I was asked to do is actually to share with you what it means by teaching for different learning style. And so what I've done is I've divided the session into 3 parts with 2 objectives and 2 learning outcomes. The first is actually to understand different learners and learning style, to understand how students can become engaged in learning. And I think that this is important. Not only we know that we have different individuals in our classroom, but we need to know how can we engage them in the classroom. And then we, for that, we will have outcomes as identify the various learning styles and approaches, as well as list activities that can cater to different learners in a meaningful way. Is the slide moving? Because I have experience. Okay, brilliant.
Yes.
I have experience. Yeah, thank you. I have experience moving the slides only to know that it never moved for the participants. So I'm a bit paranoid there. Right. So this is the structure that I was talking about. So we will start with part 1, which is actually understanding you and your learners. I think before you understand your learners, you also need to understand yourself, how you learn. And how you learn sometimes will affect how your students learn. But what is more important here is actually how your students learn. The other one, the next part is learning engagement and motivation. So how do we engage our students? How do we ensure that students are with us when we are teaching? How does understanding learners, learning approaches help us to motivate our students to learn? So during this session, we will learn about different approaches, that students can take when they are actually learning. And the final part is basically, now that we know, how do we teach for diverse learners? So since students have various learning styles and preference, how do we prepare the lesson so that they can learn better? Right, in this section, or this part, what we will be doing is to understand what are the learners' characteristics. Well, not understand, to identify what are the learners' characteristics, what are your characteristics, what do you value knowledge, and what do you think your students would value knowledge, and what excites you to learn, and what excites your students to learn, and what excites you to teach. Where the last two will be discussed in the later section, but we will start with the first section, which is understanding your learners, meaning through your perspective, based on your observation, what 3 words come to your mind when you talk about your students? And then from your observation of yourself, what 3 words come to mind when you describe your characteristics? So to do that, if you can scan this, you will be able to Right, I've got 76 responses, and there are 202 participants in here. Oh, thank you for putting the QR code on the chat. Brilliant, thank you very much. So if that's the case, then I can stop sharing and show you. Yeah, whoever who has not done the QR code, you can actually look at the chat. Right. So based on the number of participants that's still responding, I think the biggest word, or I should say the most shared word, is actually passionate. And I think passionate comes from, I mean, it's not just passionate. There's some people actually wrote passionate about learning. So that's basically when you describe yourself as a teacher, you describe yourself as a teacher who's passionate, who's fun, who's engaging, who's interactive. Murabbi, that's brilliant. And I thought somebody said handsome. Well, yeah, that can be considered, yeah, as part of important. Well, I wouldn't say important. I would say it would help, because sometimes your students will like your course not because they like your course, but they come to your class because they like to see you. And what you need to do now is actually to move them from liking to see you to liking the particular course. So that's terribly brilliant. Okay, and there are some who says that they are they make sure that their class is actually interactive, where they are also energetic, they excited, yeah, and they see themselves as facilitator. All these traits, all these characteristics are important, especially if you are trying to have a connection with your students. In Malay, they call short sendiri, but in English, we say what we don't want is actually to have false impression that students are actually enjoying our class when in actual fact, in reality, they are not. So what we have to do is actually to become passionate to our profession. And when we become passionate to our profession, what we are saying here is we are willing to take the extra mile. Shall we do the next? Have you answered the next one? Let's do that. The same code. Well, based on the 217 responses, words to describe your learners when learning is that you feel that, well, based on your experiences or your observation, that your students are excited, they are curious, they are also passionate, engaging, focused. So I don't really know why you need this particular training. Looks like everybody is doing very well here, since most of your students are excited and engaging. So I think I'm being redundant here. But the little words that's not clear, that's not there, that you can't see, also shows that some of your students are shy, they're not responsive, they're blur, they are lazy, they're daydreaming, they're sometimes bored. Excuse me. Nodding. I'm not sure why nodding is, maybe nodding is a characteristic that you can see, but I think what you're trying to say here is when they're nodding, it doesn't mean that they understand. Is that it? They're simply nodding to make sure that you, let's get on with it and let you have a pleasant day for teaching, but in actual fact, they don't feel great about, they don't understand what's going on. Well, so if I look at the bigger words, it clearly shows that everything is fine. But if you look at the fine text, you will be able to see problems that most instructors face, especially when they're teaching a large class. Oh dear, excuse me. especially when they're teaching a large class, and especially when they don't know, they're not in control to help to see whether all the students that they have in that class are really with them or not. And issues about being sleepy and being lazy, or being passive, or being blur or need guidance. These are already markers for us to know that we need to do something about it. Maybe some of our students are excited to learn, but there are also some students who are not there yet. Maybe some students are very active because of their personality, or because they actually love the program that they're taking. Because that's one of the reasons too. If they like the program that they are taking, chances are they would like to become engaged in their learning processes. But unfortunately, not all our students that enters our classroom or program actually wanted that program in the first place, you know? So they might be getting, excuse me, they might get into the program because that's the fifth choice that they had listed. Can I have a 5 seconds break?
Sure, Prof. Yeah, Prof.
Okay, as I said just now, the reason why some of our students are also not there yet is because, number one, they don't like the program. Number two, there are also other factors. So not liking the program is one of the key factors, the reason why some of them, no matter what you do, they tend to become disengaged in the classroom. So what do we learn from this? What do we, if we know that if we take the trouble to understand the background of our students, to see whether they actually like coming to the university, your particular university, or they like taking your program, knowing that helps you to see how to make meaning for the students. I remembered in one of the STEM research that I did, we interviewed a student in semester 3, a marine biology student. And we asked questions like, why do you take this particular program? And she paused for a while, and then she looked at as the interviewer. And she said, if you were to ask me in the first semester, I would definitely tell you that I hated this program because I didn't ask for it. I wanted to do medicine. What I got was marine biology. I wanted to go to University Malaya. What I got was University Malaysia Sabah. So I was really, really upset. And I just thought I'm just going to fail. And I wanted to, sometimes I just feel as if I should just stop and leave. And when we ask, you didn't leave because you're semester 3 now. And she said, the reason why I didn't leave, because in semester 2, I met this one lecturer who told us that I know going to the sea is only in semester 6 or 7. I can't remember now, but I'm taking you nevertheless. So the whole lot of them he took the trouble to actually get the bus and brought them to the beach actually. And that's where he asked them to observe, and then have a go at understanding what they can find near the beach, and then get some samples in the water. And of course, they had some fun bathing in the sea. And they came back and looked at the findings. And that's when she realized the sea is not just the sea, it's full of living things. And And it's so interesting. And he made it so interesting. The lecturer made it so interesting that she realized that, oh my God, why didn't I know about this marine biology in the first place? All I knew was medicine, law, engineering. Those are the only program or maybe a career that my school counselor told us. But they didn't tell us about marine biology. This is so interesting. I get to go in, I get to go to the sea. I get to swim. I get to find out what kind of living things are there in the ocean and all that. And it was that particular lecturer in semester 2 that transformed this particular student. And when we asked again, so did you regret taking the marine biology? And she said, no, thank God I took marine biology. And that's how she made a 180-degree turn from not liking at all the program to liking it. So if that lecturer was actually looking at the structure of the program and waiting for students to go to the beach at semester 7, it will be just too late for her. But by introducing what they are going to be having in semester 7, which is actually really deep ocean swimming, that will be by introducing that in the semester 2, that will be an eye-opener for the especially for students who did not like that particular program or they cannot see how is it that they can actually function in career-wise if they were to take marine biology. So those are the how shall I say, takeaways, yeah, from that particular session. Right, can you now scan to do this? And this is to describe yourself.
Salam, Prof.
Yeah.
You see, when I scan, the question come out is how do you value knowledge?
Yeah.
This one? This one, yeah?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you, Prof.
So let's see. How do you value knowledge? So obviously, most of you say you value it very highly. You value it by sharing it with others. This is interesting. Sadly to say, it is not well. What do you mean? Value knowledge is not well, or I don't understand this. So if whoever wrote this can actually explain to me, you feel that it is important. You feel that the more knowledgeable you are, you have the higher status in perspective, in a religious perspective, is a must. Yep, very important. Knowledge is the key to confidence. Practicing it daily and share with others. Okay. Yeah, you value knowledge very, very much because Allah encouraged and values Muslims who are knowledgeable. Yeah, I have to remind myself that I'm speaking to people who are from UAEM. They know the Sunnah and the Quranic verses better than I do, and I totally agree with you that being knowledgeable and having knowledge is actually very important. What is this? Previous slides, opportunities. But I assume you value knowledge because it provides opportunities for people to grow. Is that it? So you can chat. Yeah, whoever who wrote, we can chat and tell me. Yeah. As an amanah that need to be shared to the new generation. Yep. Knowledge is valuable when you put to use whether or not. Knowledge is valuable when put to use whether now or in future. Okay. Something precious, Islamically encouraged and should be looked at beyond the boundaries of careers. Yes, I kind of like this, and I think I need you to put this in mind when as we go along this particular session. Knowledge is expensive. True. To a certain extent, especially now, when there are not much of scholarships that like they used to before in those days. Now it's just PTPTN. Possible if you look at that way. Knowledge is important and should be shared with others. Okay, by knowledge, you value knowledge by doing. Terribly brilliant. You feel it belongs to Allah. Do it, share it. Important. Knowledge is power. True. That's the reason why, all the more reason for you to make sure that your students understand what needs to be understood in their own perspective, which means how can they now use the knowledge in their real world context. Yeah. Knowledge should be shared in the right time, in the method, and being practical. Knowledge, know is the wisdom from Allah. Knowledge is valuable when we use it at the correct place. Priceless. I really appreciated all the knowledge that I have learned from my kindergarten up until my clinical master. All knowledge are so valuable and useful. True. Knowledge helps people understand the world, make informed decisions, solve problems, and innovate. It empowers individuals and society. Seeking knowledge is wajib and necessary for betterment in life. Yep. Most valuable asset one can possess. Correct. Need to be practiced, dynamic, and need passion to understand very highly as it's a guide to good practice, useful, power, important. It's one of the 3 missions of human on earth. Knowledge is the most valuable thing in life. People can develop further only with knowledge. Even the first ayat reveal was about reading, seek knowledge. Knowledge is like food and water for living things, regardless kinds of knowledge. It gives value of being human being. Knowledge is the most important thing in the life. Every single action in this world requires knowledge. By sharing the knowledge, transferring the knowledge, as well as applying the knowledge to real world problem. Also have that in mind when we come back later. It's priceless. Knowledge is power. And Allah names himself as Al-Alim, the all-knowing one, mesmerizing. Knowledge that can engage us with our daily life and makes us close to Allah, important as means to improve humanity in our life in this world and next. It's a lifelong journey. Knowledge is part of my life. By sharing how it is beneficial for one's life, sharing with others, it's a way to go through the life. It's crucial, very important. Knowledge is a gain for teachers, important. Understanding of how a certain principle or phenomenon works. Understand, practice, share. Knowledge is important. Personal growth. Share with others as Amal Jariyah. Sharing, treasure, precious, important, extremely important. Yeah, I think we get the picture, right? That's how we value knowledge. How do you think your learners value knowledge? Okay. So based on your observation, you feel that your students value knowledge, value knowledge in terms that for instrumental reasons, either to pass the grade, to get a job, to get a certificate. They feel it's important only if it's coming up in the exam. Some do appreciate the understanding of knowledge delivered, thanking when receiving, recalling it, using it, sharing it, open for discussion among team members. You know that they value knowledge because they say thank you. And you know that they value knowledge when they open their minds to new things. They love theory with practice. Some of them very likely perhaps because they still can't see how it will be useful in the future. Partially, half of them still not at the level of appreciating the knowledge that was shared and taught to them. Yeah, for CGPA. I think largely you feel that most of them learn for the sake of exam. Yeah, though you know that they don't give up easily, but they tend to like learn or value learning, and it's simply because they want to get the certificate or do well in the exam. Generation Z only value surface, not deep knowledge. Oh, wow. That's a statement, and I presume whoever who wrote this also understand what surface and deep knowledge is. And so most of the captions here, your observations of your students here, shows that what they gain from how they value knowledge is that they only gain at the surface level, the surface knowledge, rather than the deep learning, yeah. I feel like some of them force themselves to go to university just as to please their parents. Yeah, most value knowledge highly, but they tend to think it's merely a tool for career rather than. Well, I wouldn't say that you're totally wrong, because as I mentioned just now in that little caption about how the student in UMS, how she changed her perspective of learning when her lecturer gave her some indication of the value of learning. When there is an indication of value of learning, that's when the students change from not only in terms of feeling, yeah, not only from not liking it to liking it, from maybe before just regurgitating knowledge and trying to memorize things for the sake of exam, now making connection beyond that. So that's one of the ways that we can actually trace, or now that we know that how we perceive our students are like that, we now also need to step back and find out what did we do right and what did we do wrong in our classroom in making that kind of behavior become more apparent than before. Right. If you want to know about your learning style, you can, actually there are lots, and I've given Hilda some of the tools that you can, some of the questions that you can have a look. But if you want to have a go and do it now, you can, it's either that or you just click on search for education planner learning style, and there will be 20 questions. And if you don't know your type of learning, you can actually do the 20 questions. So before you actually do that, just around maybe voices or show of hands, you know, how many of you actually make an effort to find out what kind of learning style that your students have before you start your class? How many? Do you? Okay, there's one raising hand. Maybe I should stop and then I'll be able to see one raising hand. How many of you actually you know, okay, brilliant. So there are a few who actually do that. Can you share with me, when you do that, what do you do after that? You know, why do it? Not many does it though, but yeah, but for those who did it, that will be brilliant. So for those who did, if you don't mind sharing, what do you do with the information?
Customize the content, Prof.
Sorry?
Preparing the content.
Preparing the content, okay. So can you share, for example, if you say some of your students are actually visual, what do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do?
If it's visual, usually I will change some of the content to visually. If some of the students today, they don't really like read a lot of things, so I turn it into infographics. So things like that, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So understanding, so first you need to understand how you learn too, because do you know how you learn, the rest of you?
Yeah, sometimes I ask my previous lecturer about the student standard. I ask them normally how those students I'm going to face them next semester. So they give me some background about them. So I will prepare myself before I come to the class.
Brilliant. So you kind of know already who your students are.
Yeah. This is very, very important for me.
Yes. So that's how you help to prepare your students. Yeah. Right. Yep. Well, I'm not going to ask you how many of you are visual and how many of you are auditory and how many of you are kinesthetic. You can actually find out yourself what your learning preference are. And some they have an overlap. They might be visual and they might be kinesthetic, or they might be auditory and then they might be kinesthetic, or they might be visual and auditory. So understanding students background will help you to, as your friend mentioned, as Prof Mira as well as Dr. Nasiruddin mentioned, that helps us to sort of prepare our lesson in order to make sure that we cater to the different learning styles. And we have to understand that that's just about that's just about learning style. But what we are talking about here is actually diversity. In our classroom, you do not have one size fits all kind of approach, because we have different types of learners. And those learners are different because of many factors. Heredity is one of it. Environment is one of it. Age and gender and ethnicity is also part of it. So if you've got, especially if it's international university, you probably have various students coming from various countries, and they have different cultures. So some might be more vocal than the other, but it doesn't mean the one who's quiet is actually passive. So there must be ways for you to also get them to be involved in the learning process, because all these are factors that can influence their learning style. And of course, there's also cognitive function, which means everybody has got their own CPU. When I say CPU means how you process your information. So some people are fast, some people needs a little nudge, some people need really handheld way of getting through. So that's the different cognitive function. Affective function is where the feeling of being able to do, whether they know, they have the confidence to actually do it, whether they have the right they are self-efficacious or not. And cognitive function is basically whether they have the will to do it, they have the motivation to do it, do they have the volition to do it. So that this is basically the affective and the cognitive can be part of the motivation, and cognitive is actually the intellectual differences among the students. Yeah. Yeah, for those who have not, especially for those, yeah, somebody is saying here, for those who are introverts, your students who are introverts. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Personality and ethnicity and culture, all that plays a role in your classroom and how they interact in your classroom. So don't just don't just rely on one way of interaction. There's now that we have multimodality approaches to getting information from your students, getting them from different various will help them to give you information and taking into consideration the different types of learners. I might overlook some of the questions. So if there are questions, yes.
Question about being an introvert. What about if the lecturers are also introvert? How do they overcome this?
Yeah, that's nice. Do you believe me? Do you believe me if I say I'm introvert too?
I am also introvert.
I'm also introvert, Prof.
Yeah. People who are introvert can still teach, and people who are introvert are very sensitive to different types of learners, because they know, how shall I say, they know how it feels to not to be silenced by the vocals, by those who are very noisy, the ones who are very loud and able to speak. So so they tend to become very empathetic towards students who are introvert. So my way of doing things is, when I'm teaching, I sometimes forget that I'm introvert. And because I enjoy doing it, so I tend to be able to to handle it well. But my students might not be able to be confident when they are speaking, and I think that's also because of the numbers of years trained speaking in front of people, that you tend to now change your introvertness into a little bit having a little bit of extroversion in yourself. But your students, as I mentioned, if you're asking your students in the classroom and you're asking people to respond to you verbally, chances are the introverts will be very quiet. So how do you get them to express themselves? How? Any ideas?
I usually will use Mentimeter.
Sorry?
I will usually use Mentimeter.
Brilliant, yeah. Use Mentimeter or whatever, chat, WhatsApp. Sometimes they prefer to communicate with you, or even in your LMS, right? You've got the forum section in your respective learning management system. You will have your forum where they can actually express their opinion and all that. And my colleague has actually done a research, what he discovered is that he thought he was just like everyone else who felt that their students are passive and therefore not good, because we're actually teaching future teachers, and if they are passive and they're introverts and all that, then it's not going to be good for them when they become teachers, right? Until he also allowed during his teaching learning session, he allowed students to actually express themselves via this other ways, other means, other than speaking in the classroom. And that's why still water runs deep. There's a phrase that says still water runs deep. He realized that people who are quiet in the classroom are really thinkers, who actually can speak and explain and articulate their themselves better. It's just that they cannot articulate themselves in public because of personality or lack of confidence. So when he approached me to find out, how can we help this kind of students, and I said, well, you can ask them to start working in groups. and start sharing in, smaller groups, like pair to smaller groups to a bit larger groups, and then the whole class. So trying to help them move from not being able or not being comfortable to speak in the classroom to now getting some confidence, speaking to the pair, smaller groups, sharing their views, giving them feedback about what their thinking was. And by doing that, also not only, by giving the feedback, it's also helping the students to overcome what they think they're bad at. They always think, people who have less confidence, they think that they're not smart. But in actual fact, they are smart. But it's just that they feel that they're not smart. So you need to give them that confidence that what you say makes sense. It's brilliant. So you're providing them feedback, encouragement, in order for them to actually grow. I remember when I was in UK, when I did my PhD, and one of the classes, there was one professor, was very, very scary. And it was about policy. And I don't really know about policies at that time, but I had to take that particular course, policies in education. And, typically in the class, there were people from everywhere, and I was the only Malaysian. And typical of Malaysian, they're very quiet in the classroom, I guess. So I was like really quiet. And she was asking everybody questions, and to her question, she was asking for getting responses, and they had very good, I thought they had good responses, and they were very confident, the way they say. I thought it makes sense. But at the same time, I was also trying to answer her question, but I'm answering in my head. I'm not answering to her. Until she came to me and she said, "What about you?" And I was like, oh dear. And so I had to now transfer whatever that I was thinking out to thinking it out loud. So I was telling her what I thought. And to my surprise, this is what she commented. I can't remember exactly, but that was one of the trajectories in my life after going through that section. When she said, the rest of you need to make sure that you actually study. And you need to make sure that the next time when I ask a question, you make sure that you're the first to answer, because then all these people will not, because she was saying that the rest of them were swaying everybody's attention to, digressing everybody to a certain tangent. And I was pulling back everybody to what the question was. And that made me felt, oh, I'm even better than the whites, and I'm even better than, that people will say that I'm 3R, but yeah, what I'm trying to say here is at that moment, I felt, okay, Malaysian can also be intelligent. Sometimes you feel that you're not, but it takes that feedback to give you the courage that you actually can do it. Right. So this, as I mentioned just now, these are the characteristics of the learners that you don't have to worry, because these are all the factors that may influence them in the classroom: hereditary, environment, previous knowledge, experiences, and current understanding. So this is the thing that you need to tap. This is the thing that you cannot change except for environment. You can't change the gene, but you can change the environment. Previous knowledge of experiences, you can provide, they might not have that previous knowledge experiences, so knowing what they know and establishing that previous knowledge before the current new knowledge is introduced, that's also important. Approach versus trait. So we know that learning style and learning approaches, those are preference. They can be changed. They're not traits. They're not like temperament. Temperament are traits. You cannot change that because it's part of your DNA. But if it's approaches, you can change. So if they were surface learners, as you mentioned just now, they were passive, they just want to learn it for the exam, that there is a way that we can actually change that so that they now understand that they need to make meaning. And the type of learners that you have, which developmental stages are they? Are they still at the adolescent, or are they already in the young adulthood stage? That also will influence. When I say adolescent, is because depending on who you're teaching, if it's A-level students, if it's matriculation or foundation, they are all in the transition period of being an adolescent and a young adult. And some of you who are teaching at the master's level, postgraduate students, they're no longer young adults. They're in the developmental stages where they might be in the middle adulthood. And I hope there's no late adulthood. But then having said that, we did have once upon a time a 70-year-old candidate who was actually doing his first degree. He's then a millionaire. He decided to want, getting a degree at the age of 70. So in that case, you have to cater to a late adulthood stage. So understanding the different types of stages also will help you to realize that the students have more than learning than life. What I meant is that sometimes whatever happens in their lives will also influence the way in which they learn. Yeah. For example, if they are in the young adulthood stage, they will now have problems with the opposite sex, where they now learn to, fall in love and out of love, and all this will definitely have influence in the way in which you teach. So as I mentioned just now, the early adulthood, the young adulthood, and the middle adulthood, and sometimes late adulthood, although that's very rare. So in terms of the cognitive, as I mentioned, the CPU just now is basically related to intelligence and their prior experience. Affective is their personality, their emotion, their temperament, whether they are, and this temperament is actually a trait which you can, which appears since you are a baby. Cognitive is where it's related to the motivation, where they can actually be, whether they have the will to learn. When they have the will to learn, they're willing to do self-regulated learning. And their learning approaches will differ as well, related to their learning style. And on top of that, and I think one of you said actually the Generation Z just wants the, what was it? The Generation Z just wants the answer, or Generation Z, I can't remember what, but some of you mentioned Generation Z just now, that they just want to get it done and over with. Well, not quite. Actually, they are, I'm talking about myself, yeah? I'm in this Generation X. I used to be teaching Generation Y people, and now I'm seeing Generation Z, and I think if I still stay a few more years, I probably will meet Generation Alpha. Now, the more, since Y, actually X has already, see, X is the nice generation. I'm not being biased, but yeah. We kind of appreciate the generation before that, and we are like the transition between that generation of not using technology to a generation that will be using technology a lot. So Generation X can still learn to cope with the digitalization in education. As you go up the generation, Y, Z, and Alpha, the integration of technology in their lives is getting seamless. Why maybe just able to use, they know what to do, they know how to get the information in the technology and all that. Z simply can't do without, and they are very, very flexible. So when you understand this kind of generation, understanding this kind of generation also helps you to not only learn, helping you to understand the learning style, but helping you to understand this generation, the different types of generation and their characteristics, will also be able to help you plan your lesson well. Now, if you know that these generations prefer technology and they prefer to learn better using technology, then you need to use those technology to make them become connected. You know, you need to connect them to see the essence, essence of learning. So we can't be teaching. That's why when I asked you the first time, how you learn and what your learning style will affect how you teach. Now, if you were to look at yourself and how you learn during your time when you were doing your degree, it's totally different, you know. I remember during my time when I was doing my degree, we still had to go to the library looking at the microchips. Is that what you call it? Microfiche. I can't even remember now because I don't think it exists in the library in the first place. But that's what we do, you know, we search information through all this database. Now, these generations, if you ask them to do the same thing, they will say, which earth did you come from? Which part of planet did you actually come from? Because in their world, the database comes within a split of a second and literally at the tip of their finger. You know, it's no longer figurative, it's literally at the tip of their finger. So understanding how they learn helps you to prepare lessons that would fit their generation, number one, so that they know that you appreciate them, they know that they can function, and they also can give you information that you yourself will be able to learn from them. And that's the beauty of teaching, is the teacher will never stop learning. So it's not the teacher transmitting that knowledge, it's the teacher, how shall I say, providing that environment where the teacher and the students can learn from each other. So there are times when the learner is actually learning from the teacher is also learning from the students are learning from each other. So the more you are able to do that, and that's why when you go up the ladder, when it's seamless, things like collaborative learning comes into play, where they work in a group, where they learn from each other. Remember I told you about how to move your students from becoming introvert. I wouldn't want them to change from introvert to extrovert, whatever, but basically helping you to know what they are thinking, even though they are introverts. So working together in a collaborative way will give that opportunities for students, no matter where, you know, their background is, they're able to collaborate, and learn from each other. And to help us understand our students, we also need to, it's also good to understand about what Knowles talk about andragogy, the need to know. And according to Knowles, he says, adults will learn if there is a need to know. So they know, you provide the reason for them to know. Yeah, so adults learn better when they know why they need to know. That means learn, especially if they can reflect on the learning process. So that when they feel that they need to know, they would learn better. The next, self-concept. When treated as someone who is capable and self-directed, adults will develop autonomy in learning where they are responsible for decisions and directions. So it's when treated as someone who is capable and self-directed. That means when you provide them with the confidence that they can do it, that they can do on their own, that they're there, by giving them feedback to develop their self-concept. Remember, I told you about how that professor gave me that self-concept. So it's helping me to know, hey, I'm not that bad, so I can do this. So that's where I become motivated to learn more. So taking an autonomous approach where initially I didn't like about policy. Now I feel like, oh, for someone who don't like about policy, I make some good statements in the classroom. So I need to know better so that I can appreciate what this is all about. Life experiences. Adults have a lot to share and learn better from others during sharing session. Remember, I told you about the collaborative learning. So the more they are able, given opportunities for them to collaborate, they will know how to learn, they will be able to gather life experiences, not necessarily from their own. They can always do vicarious learning. Vicarious learning is where they learn from other people, so other people's experiences. So this will give them significant prior knowledge as well as experiences, and this is actually very helpful when they are trying to construct knowledge. They learn better, adults learn better when they are ready to learn. So more keen to learn when they see the relevance in learning and applicable to their immediate situation. So when they are ready to learn is when they are able to see how whatever that they're learning can be transferred in their everyday life, can be transferred in the real world context, to give them meaning, when they are actually learning. Next is orientation to learning. It's life-centered, problem or task-oriented. It needs for knowledge that is applicable to their environment. This is how they can see the connection between what they are learning in the classroom to what they can actually experience outside of classroom. Remember I told you about the marine biology? So what he was trying to do was actually to connect what they're doing in the classroom to the real setting, which is actually outside of classroom. Motivation, internal versus, internal versus external. Internal motivation means you learn because you want to learn. External is where you learn because you want to pass the exam and get the CGPA, whatever.
Apa dia? Laki je.
Okay. Adults learn better if they are intrinsically motivated. So if you are intrinsically motivated, that means when you have high intrinsic motivation to learn, you don't need anyone to tell you to learn. You will do it on your own because you love it. You value learning as very important, as what you have all shown to me, that you value knowledge very important. So we hope that our students will have that kind of value too. They have goals, you know what you want, and you have expectations. Now, intrinsic motivation also rely on effort. That means the locus of control is that you are in control if you put effort as the denominator, or maybe the variable. If you put luck as the variable, then you are highly going to be extrinsically motivated rather than intrinsically motivated. So people who are intrinsically motivated, they put effort as the reason for them to be able to grasp the knowledge. So understanding all of this, so we know that the students need to know, the students need to feel that they understand, they have the capacity to learn, so they can become autonomous. They develop, you provide them opportunities for them to have learning experiences, not only learning from them, experiences that they have already got from their own past experiences, but also learning from others through vicarious learning. They see the relevance of learning, and that makes them become ready to learn, and they know that it is life-centered, that whatever that they do, they learn in the classroom can be applied outside of classroom, and they put effort in it, and so that they become intrinsically motivated. All this helps you to now figure out, if I know all this, what can I do in my classroom? How do I design my learning and teaching as well as my assessment? Considering all these factors. So these are questions that I want you to consider. So the basic principles of adult learning. So the adults are self-directed and autonomous. Adults already have some knowledge and experiences. They already have that. Adults are ready to learn relevant tasks, utility, and value. Adults are motivated to learn and learn better if intrinsically motivated. and adults expect to apply learning immediately, that is problem-centered. So by looking at this, if this is the basic principles of adult learning, what kind of teaching strategies could you have, to encourage this? Any shouts?
Prof, there's question. Can you repeat the question, Prof?
Okay. If this is the basic principle, if you know that this is the basic principles of adult learning, right? That means your students are adult. Am I right? They're no longer children. They're adults. They are either young adults or middle adulthood. They're in the middle adulthood stage, or maybe yeah. So anyway, so if you know that they can be self-directed and autonomous, they do have knowledge and experience. They do learn better if they see the value of learning. That means the utility of learning this, and they learn better if they are intrinsically motivated, and they learn better if they can see the applicability of what they are learning. So how would you consider designing your lesson? What teaching strategy would you do? That's what I'm saying. Give me one example, one example of teaching strategy that you can do, that you think that one can help to cater almost all of these principles of adult learning.
There is
Problem-based
one
learning.
Sorry. There is one answer in the chat, more hands-on and experiential learning.
Brilliant, yes. More hands-on and experiential learning. Brilliant, yes. Problem-based learning, yes. Active learning, brilliant. Group discussion and paired discussion. Okay, Kahoot, okay, Kahoot, okay lah. Kahoot can be done to get them excited, but to help them to become autonomous, I think you need more than Kahoot. Okay, give real problem example and ask them to give input based on what they have learned. Yes, yep, good. Flipped classroom, yes. I'm assuming if it's flipped classroom, whatever that you do outside and whatever you do inside is actually helping them to see the connection, then that's terribly brilliant. Gamify the learning experiences. Of course, not all courses can have the privilege to do that, but yeah, that would be a great way of doing it. Yep, group discussion and presentation. But of course, I think group discussion and presentation is fine. But I think what is more important is having the group discussion and the presentation as real as possible, as real world as possible. It's no longer them as a student to present, it's them taking charge or them taking the role of somebody to solve the problem or to present. That will give them a sense of placing, having a thought, of how this particular knowledge can be used in their context. All right, and of course, and role play. Okay, hang on a minute. Okay, I get it. So can you see what I'm trying to say here? You now understand the principles of adult learning, and you realize that lecture, what I was trying to get at is lecture, no matter how great you are, will not help your students to get there. Lectures only work for students who are already intrinsically motivated. Not only intrinsically motivated in terms of learning style, they're auditory. And not only they are auditory in terms of their learning individual differences, they have very high CPU. They can, absorb a lot of things at one go. and they're very good at making notes out of what they have heard and all that. So they are motivated to learn, and that's why lectures work for them. But unfortunately, if you were to do I think most of you have actually used learning style questionnaires to your students, you will realize that in your classroom, for all you know, there are many visuals and kinesthetic more than auditory. And that's all the more reason we need to do all the things that you have said. So I'm not asking everyone to do just problem-based learning. No, I'm saying we need to have a blend of, lecture a little bit and then active learning a lot, so that the students get a chance to have those experiences, to see the value of learning, to learn to become autonomous, to be motivated when they see that they can do it, especially after you have given them the feedback. And if they are able to see the relevance of learning that into the real world context, just like what the marine biology lecturer did, students will be more engaged in learning. Okay. Did I miss anything else? Okay. Right. So these are the assumptions that the principal that NOS have said, that the self-concept of the adult learner is self-directing and autonomous. Prior experiences are the richest resources available to adult learners. The simulation, just as you said just now, problem-based problem solving, case methods, group discussion are suitable approaches. So well and good for those who say that. And of course, with the new generation, gamification will be definitely one of it that should be here in number 2. Yeah. So the need to know, the adults need to know the utility and value of the material that they are learning before embarking on learning. So the first task of a teacher is to help the learners become aware of the need to know. So that was what the second semester lecturer was trying to do, to help the students have the need to know. Why do I learn marine biology? Because when that particular research was actually just to interview the students, but I was so curious that I had to ask the lecturer, why did he do whatever that he did? And he said, well, the reason he took the extra mile because he is just like Dr. Nasruddin, who actually got information from the previous lecturer, because they know already the first semester students will come into the second semester students, right? So found out that almost all of them didn't like the program because the first semester lecturer had actually asked those questions. And when he also asked the students again in the classroom, how many of them actually asked for this particular program? Not many. Yeah, so that's the reason why he realized that I got to make sure that they know what they're missing if they don't like the program. So that's why, because I'm passionate about the program, so he is a passionate lecturer, so he took the extra mile. He paid for the bus to take them. He also bought lunch for all the students because and it was all from his pocket money. And I said, you don't even ask from the university. I was just being nosy. And he said, no, I don't need all that, because what I want is for my student, the day that my students feel that they like it and they now be able to see how this particular program is actually beneficial for mankind, then I'm okay. So adult learners tend to become ready to learn things that they believe they need to know to be able to do it in order to cope effectively with real life situation problems. So they tend to be less subject-centered than children. They are increasingly problem-centered. So if you know already that the adults are problem-centered, so that's why best for you to give problem-solving activities. Role of teachers is just to facilitate. And as you mentioned, providing the experiences for the learners. Learning is best when you focus on the process and not just the outcomes. But of course, that's the dilemma, right? When we talk about outcomes-based education, we look at the learning outcomes. But believe me, if you look at the process, the outcomes, and if you understand about learning outcomes and the notion of aligning your learning outcomes to your teaching and learning as well as delivery, inshallah, your students will be able to get the right experiences. Experiential learning has one of the assumptions is that all learning is relearning, because they are constantly re-evaluating their previous experiences. Learning requires the resolution of conflicts between different modes of adaptation of the world. Learning is the holistic process of adaptation. It's a result of synergetic transaction between the person and the environment, and learning is the process of creating knowledge, right? So that's why having the experiences knowledge is truly important. So why do we need to have our students become, or maybe not why, how can we ensure that our students become self-regulated and determined and not become passive and blur and whatever words that you have said just now? These are what I think that we need to look at. One is actually in terms of time management. Some of them are very poor at time management. And because they are poor in time management, they become lost. When they become lost in the sense, they give up. So understanding that, you structure your teaching and learning delivery into blocks, so that they are able to fulfill, certain blocks. Maybe like if there are 3 CLOs, then the first block will be the first course learning outcome. The second block will be the second learning outcome. If you help them to do that, then they will be able to time themselves well, and you probably will have in between, or before you have your summative assessment, you probably have your formative assessment, so that they will get some feedback. And through that feedback will give them some indication, giving them indication how to get it right, and for you to have some indication of which of your students who needs extra help. Yeah, so formative assessment is important, together with the summative assessment. So helping your students manage their time well helps them to become self-regulated in the long run. Yeah. Sorry. Motivated, those that lack self-motivation tend to procrastinate or avoid seeking help. You have to understand that students who are not motivated, they will procrastinate. And they don't want to seek help. And help seeking and academic achievement has positive correlation. If you seek help, students who seek help, chances are there is a strong and positive relationship with academic achievement. Students who do not seek help, obviously, will have poor academic achievement. So how do we help them not to become procrastinate and ensure them to seek help? That's why no lectures. You need to give them activities. When they are given activities to solve problems, while they are solving the problems, they have the reason to seek help, because they need to get it done by certain period, right? So they will say, excuse me, is this right? Or am I doing it right? Or I understand it this way. Am I okay? Am I on the right track? They will ask you questions. And when they can see that they are able to get that, able to answer or able to solve the problem, they will not procrastinate. They will be motivated to do more. Engage in collaborative environment. Those who do not take the opportunity to actively engage in collaborative learning may feel alienated. So if you're asking your students to only do work on their own, they will feel alienated as they see other students being able to solve the problem and they still can't. Whereas if they work in collaborative environment, they learn from each other. Sometimes sometimes they give good ideas and sometimes they gain good ideas. So by doing that, all of them learn in a dynamic way. Autonomy, those who are not able to work independently may not be able to cope studying the materials on their own, hence lack the direction to succeed. So how do we make sure that the students become autonomous is where, after allowing them to work collaboratively, now you're asking them to work independently. And from there, things like asking them to reflect on their learning processes helps them to become autonomous, help them to really look at and evaluate themselves, how they can actually learn and improve. Effective, those who not see the meaning of fun or in learning may not be curious to learn. So if they don't see the meaning of learning, they don't see the value of learning, they don't see the fun in learning, they might not be able to appreciate learning. And transfer of learning, if it's not designed to make the connection to the real world, may impede learners' ability to transfer learning. So that's the end of part 1. We will have a short 10 minutes stretch out break, and we will consume
10:40, Prof. Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Before we take a break, I wanted to set the record. Okay, Prof, affiliation is not from UMP, Prof is from UUM. So I'm sorry about that, Prof.
Okay.
Problem.
It's okay.
Okay, so we have a 10 minutes break. We'll resume at 10:40, inshallah. Assalamualaikum. Assalamualaikum. Welcome back. Prof, before you can resume, there is a Dr. Hazarini raised hand. Do you want to ask question?
Sorry, Prof. No, that from the first one when you
okay,
asked if to listen. Sorry, I read you now.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, Prof, you may proceed.
Okay. Switch on the... Have I shared the screen? Yes, yeah. Okay. These are the 2 questions that I've got. Welcome back, everybody. These are the 2 questions that I've got from the chat, from the chat box. One is how do we assess or know if one is ready to learn? And the other one is how do we know which type of learners do our students fall into? Is there any test or way to identify? This was the one that I gave earlier, the 20 questions on learning style that you can actually use to help to find out from your student. But I've also given to Puan Hilda the some of the other questionnaires that you can actually use, because there's so many. So you can actually use to find out the type of learning style that your students have, so that you'll be able to identify them. No? So that one is covered. Now, for how do we assess or know if one is ready to learn? That's why asking them on the first day of class why you take this particular course is also crucial. I remembered when I was teaching my first time teaching undergraduate students, when I asked it was 130 of them in the classroom, and when I asked them how many of you actually want to become teachers and took this and actually wanted so much to become a teacher and took this program, there was only 2 measly students who raised their hand, and the rest did not raise their hands. And when I asked how many of you, it's your parents who actually insisted that you do this particular program, or even fill out the form for you in order for you to do this particular educational program. And I think almost all the students raised their hand. And despite, coming into the program, you need to do a lot of things. You need to sit for the MATC test, you need to be interviewed before you can come into the program. But these people survive, and in actual fact, they don't really like the program at all. They were just being there because their parents wanted them to do. So when I found out, so one is actually to find out from the students, where they are and how they see this particular program is related to them. The other is then I started asking them to make connections. Every time when I teach them the theory, the worst part of it is I teach educational psychology, and it's full of theories. And every time when I had to introduce to them one theory, I had to ask them to make connection for them as learners and for them as teachers as well, which means if they were a teacher, how do understanding this particular theory would help them? How does this understanding this particular theory would help them? So, so how we assess and how we make sure that our students learn better is when they see the relevance in learning. That's when we know they're ready to learn. Until and unless they see the relevance, they're not ready to learn. So if we miss that point, if we continue just teaching without knowing the fact that they don't really like the program, or they cannot see the connection between what they're learning to what they're going to be doing in the future, and how this is actually important, then I'm afraid we are actually missing the point, that there will be lots of missed opportunities. So communicating with them, getting them to tell you where they are, is one way to actually observe. How you know that your students are actually ready to learn. Does that help? Does it make sense? I think the person who asked me that question was Rahim something. Okay, good. Right. That's done. Okay, so this is the bit where now that we know who our students are, I think some who have missed the point that how do we know the type of students? There will be a lot. There will be two, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I've given to Hilda the questionnaire, and the notes that comes with it has already been given to her. So I am with the instruction that it will be given only after the session is over. The two questionnaires, you can actually use it to get your students the different learning styles from your students. Yeah. So now that you know the different types of learning style, okay, that's fine. You know that because you know that some students are visual, some students are auditory, some students are kinesthetic. So how you prepare your lesson and the activities that you have will take into consideration the different types of learners. And the best part of it is when they learn from each other. The visual will learn from the auditory will learn from the kinesthetic. The more they learn, the better they are at understanding the information that they are getting from your class. The next question is, how do we ensure that our students are engaged in our lesson? And this is the ABC of learning engagement and motivation. I think one of the things that Dr. Rahim was mentioning just now, I was one of the ACAP trainers during the time in which ACAP was training lecturers for teaching and learning. Yeah, now and then there was a period where they changed it to leadership, and now I don't know what they're doing. So when they were talking about teaching and learning, I was one of the master trainers for learning engagement and motivation, and we talk about learning engagement. So the ABC in learning engagement is basically A stands for attitude, which is relating to motivation and feelings. And B is actually behavior, that's looking at habit and skills. So we want to see the difference between the change in the behavior in terms of the habit and skills. And C is cognitive, in relation to mental aspects, and relate to the beliefs and the values that they bring. I know the values here will make you feel, hang on a minute, I thought values will be attitude, or, you know, how is it that it's actually cognitive? But values here is the thinking, but the thing is actually important, which is the mental aspect. So that's the ABC of motivation. So that learning, engagement, motivation. So one is actually to look at the attitude, the behavior, as well as the cognitive. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do afterwards is actually to fill out the questionnaire. This is called the study process questionnaire. You imagine, I want you to imagine as a typical student in your classroom. Yeah, how would your students learn? So respond the questionnaire as if you are your student. Okay, respond as you imagine a typical student that you teach would respond. Is that clear? Yep. Okay. Yep. If you can scan that and answer that. Are you able to answer the questions? I mean, are you able to see the questionnaire?
Yes, Prof. Yes,
Yes,
okay.
Prof.
Alhamdulillah. Okay. Now, before I forget. Oops. Somebody requested this. Thank you, Nurul Hassana. I don't know why. I don't think I'm well today, so I'm a bit slow at every end. Thank you very much for that.
Welcome, Prof.
Right, there are only 8 questions. Am I right? And I'm sure you're done with it. What I want you to do is actually to calculate 1, 3, 5, 7. Whatever, let's just say for question number 1, you put 3, right? You said it's 3. So calculate the sum of whatever that you have written. Faham tak? Do you understand what I mean? So you calculate what your responses for 1, 3, 5, 7, total it up, 2, 4, 6, 8, total it up. So S is going to be here and D is going to be here.
Got it,
So,
Prof.
sorry?
Got it. Inshallah.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, browsing will be, something. Browsing will be just, skim through. That will be browsing. Okay, can you all shout to me and let me know, how shall we do this? Huh? Is there a poll that we can do? We don't have poll. We don't have poll in Zoom.
Ada, Prof.
Ada kat mana? Where?
Dekat sebelah participants tu, Prof nampak tak?
Sebelah participants is chat.
Only Haas can say it, Hilda. So it's only on your end. Yeah.
Okay. It's not on my end. Okay, it's okay. All right, just shout out lah. How many of you have high S? Or which one is higher, S or D?
S.
S?
Yes, S.
Yeah,
S.
100 is S.
S.
Yeah. So I assume without asking the rest of the hundreds people that's here, it's going to be the same, right? So what does S means and what does D means? Basically, the S is the surface approach, and the D is the deep learning approach. Yeah, as I'm looking at the chat here, yeah, everybody seems to say that the S is higher. So okay. So this is the approaches to learning. Yeah. Remember I told you this approaches to learning. It's not a trait. So which means it can be changed. So how students learn is influenced by how teachers teach. So surface approach, basically, the intention is to reproduce. So they learn in order to regurgitate information, to reproduce information at the time when they are able to see, well, at the time when it's needed. So usually it's actually at the final exam, right? They're concerned about grades. So they always ask you questions like, is this coming out in the exam? Or how many marks am I getting out of this, you know, to do this? Do I need to do this? Is this part of the exam? So those are the kind of questions that they usually ask. And of course, as I mentioned just now, regurgitations of knowledge. So intention to reproduce. That's why they want your notes. They're not happy if you don't give them notes. So they will complain if you say that there's no notes in my class, you have got to make your own notes. So they don't like it. So they will want your notes because they want to reproduce. So in terms of assessment, it's rote memorization. Information is, and they need the rote assessment, rote memorization so that they are able to provide the information when needed. Yeah. During the assessment, learning failure to distinguish principles from examples, because they are they're trying to remember the information. They cannot see the bigger picture. They cannot see they cannot differentiate between the trees and the forest, I should say, right? So they cannot distinguish between the principles from examples. And other features, they treat tasks as external factors. They focus on discrete elements without integration. So that's why they feel that there's just too much to learn, because they cannot see the connection. They see as things that are separate. So to survive, if people oh no. Oh, somebody is asking me, can somebody share how to calculate the S and D again? Well, you calculate the S and D is like this. S will be 1357, D will be 2468. What you put for your 2468 and what you put for your 1357. So 1357 will be S, and the 2468 will be D. Okay, right. Okay, so that is basically surface approach learning. Deep approach learning also can be influenced by how the teachers teach, and can be promoted through student-centered learning, where the intention, if before it was just intention is actually to reproduce knowledge. Now the intention is to understand. Making meaning is essential concern, and it's very concerned about in-depth understanding. Assessment, meaningfully memorized. There is memorization to a certain extent, but the memorization is done in a meaningful way. You don't realize that you're memorizing, but you're memorizing. And it's used for later use, and it relates evidence to conclusion. Learning, it relates new ideas to previous knowledge, and how they also look at ability for them to be able to look at the concepts to everyday experiences and discover inquiry based, or and it's appreciated. What I mean, what it means by meaningful memorize. Meaningfully memorize here, I can give you an example of my own experience when I had to teach a group of senior teachers and head teachers who were teachers before and they didn't have the qualification, so they need to do their degree. Okay, it was a special, they had special warrant for them to come and study in order for them to get the qualification, because during their time, they didn't have to have a degree to become a teacher or head teacher. So now they need to have that qualification, so they had to come back and study. Can you imagine? These are the people who have long served in the teaching profession, and they have limited space in their to remember information, let alone to understand them. So all they have is just experiences. Now, experiences alone will not be enough, because especially when you're teaching, as I mentioned just now, I had to teach application of educational psychology. So they had to be exposed to different types of theories. Of course, all of them, I remember, they were all saying that I was just too young. They are very mature, and they say you know, we are so mature and wiser compared to you. And I had to tell them, can you see the pintu gerbang, the arc as you enter University Utara Malaysia? Put all your labels outside of the university, you know, come in and you are all my students, regardless of my age and yours. And when you leave, don't forget to bring back your labels and your dignitaries, so that you stay and behave, you know, in a well-mannered way. Because in my classroom, you might be like little children because you're doing active learning. What I asked them to do was actually to come up with a mind map. And they had to work in groups, because there were 70 of them in the classroom, and they had to work in groups, 7 in a group. The reason why there are 7, because there are 7 theories. So each of them took one theory, and they developed the mind map. And there was one group which actually comprises of head teachers. And they are I would say, the main people, you know, the big brother of this group members. They dictate what goes and what doesn't in the classroom. And their mind map was actually like a standard one mind map, you know, where you have the title in the middle and seven section, and it's just title, you know. And when they saw their friends, because what I told them to do was, after they've shown me that they've done the mind map, they thought they're just going to submit it to me. And I say, no, now it's for you to pin it against the wall, because we're going to do presentation. So they quickly come to tell me, they say, can we redo this? Can we submit this next time? I said, why? Because I don't think we did a good job. And I said, no, it's all right. Everybody is actually learning. So that's when I said, never mind, just put it on the wall. It's okay. Everybody is learning from each other. But in actual fact, I wanted them to really, really learn from that session, which means really, really learn from their friends how different theirs is compared to their friends. And the best part of it is that head teacher, he had one of his teachers from the same school as his class colleague as well, class member. And she was able to do a very good detailed mind map, and she was able to present it very well, very articulately, explaining all the theories. And he was there recording, you know, video recording the teacher explaining. And that's the 7 of them had to really learn in the process, you know, like learning from other people, from listening to other people, how they had to explain to other people about their own mind map. And in that process, after I completed that whole session, and what we did was, see, there are 7 of them, so that means there are 10 groups. So it's 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. And I asked them to swap. You know, after they have presented, they had to swap. And that means they have to listen to everybody's presentation, basically. So there are 10 presentations, listening it to 10 times. 7 people explaining to it. Also, when they reach their own section, they have to present it. So having them listen to many times and having them to explain many times helps them to remember, you know, to memorize meaningfully. That's what I mean. Meaningfully memorize. They don't realize that they're actually memorizing, but they are having to repeat what they have actually done, and explain to people, and getting questions from people, and having to re-explain to the participants, help them to sharpen their understanding. Now, at the end of the class, when I asked, all I need to do at the end of the class was just to say, okay, what did cognitive theory says? And everybody was raising their hands because they know already the answers. They have listened to many times. They have to listen to people many times. So they were very happy because they were able to share their views. And at the end, after having said all that, and I said, what lesson did you learn from this? And remember the group that didn't do well in their mind map? They actually stood up and said, I would like to apologize. And that was the first time they actually say something nice. And everyone was shocked. Is this really coming from the big brother? It's like the piper of the whole entire group. And he says, we'd like to apologize because we didn't do a good job. But we would like to also thank all our friends in this room because we learned a lot from you. And he actually said his judgment towards his teacher was that she's very quiet. She doesn't know anything because she's quiet. She's passive. She doesn't know anything. It's only today that he heard her explaining the theories so well that it changed his perspective of her, you know. So that was also a lesson to be appreciated of, you know. So yeah, so that's what I mean by meaningfully memorize, and how to make the lesson become meaningful for the students. Right, so that is deep learning approach. And this is the theory that came with it, which is actually called the social cognitive. It's also a theory that helps us to understand how students can become motivated. So of course, we have the social cultural perspective, social cultural context in which we have to take into consideration where the students come from, what are the previous knowledge, what are their learning style, as we were trying to figure it out since this morning. And then what we do in the classroom. So whether we do teacher-directed or student-directed is going to influence the way in which the students see themselves and how they motivate themselves to learn. So the classroom contextual factors also is important. The intervention strategies is also important. The internal factors, internal factors will be related to their motivation. What are their expectancy components? Are they self-efficacious? Do they feel that they can handle it? Do they know what this, do they know, do they like what they are learning? Attribution, what values do they put? How do they attribute learning, your course? Value component, what are their goals? What are their task value? Effective components, are they anxious in your classroom? Do they see that the self-worth of learning in your classroom? And all this will influence their motivation to learn, whether they put effort as the key that will help them to change, to learn, to be motivated to learn. Or is it because of luck or outside or external factors? So all these will influence how students see themselves learning in your classroom, and how you plan the way in which you teach, will also influence the way in which your students learn. This is what Biggs mentioned in his 3P model, and this was adapted by Treadwell and Prof. The 3P model says that there's passage, there's process, and there's product, where you understand the characteristic of the students is important. Your understanding of the characteristic of the students, so their previous understanding, their aptitudes, their abilities, and all this understanding that, and what you do in your classroom, how you plan your teaching method and your assessment, your learning environment, in which what I mean here is your ability to align your course learning outcome to your teaching and learning as well as your assessment, and understanding your characteristic students will be your passage, and that will be influencing your students' perception of the context. So when the students perceive that that there is quality of teaching, that there's clarity of goals, there's appropriateness of assessment, then the chances of them becoming engaged in your classroom is higher, because they can see the value of learning in your classroom. And once they have the perception that there is a good quality of teaching, there's clarity of goals, there's appropriateness of assessment, chances are students will it will also influence the students' approaches to learning. So if they see the appropriateness of assessment, chances are they will be more deep learning rather than surface learning. But if you design in such a manner that you focus on assessment, meaning you keep saying, or the way in which you teach is, oh, this is coming out in the exam. So you are propagating students to just focus the knowledge for the sake of exam. And that's how that will influence students' approaches to learning, where they take the surface approach of learning, where it focuses on reproduction of information. And of course, finally, how students approach learning will also reflect on the learning outcome. You know, what they learn, whether it's quality or is it quantity. Sometimes I know you can tell me that if they how is it that my students they are surface learners, but they do well, they get great CGPAs. Yeah, but the difference between surface learners and deep learners is that deep learners, they might not, but not necessarily true, but they might not get all A's. However, the knowledge that they have lasts long. They will remember for a long time. Whereas surface learners, they remember that they see things which are disconnected, which they see things as separate. So it really depends on the person's CPU, the person's ability to remember. So some people can remember a lot of information, better. So they will probably do well. So that's why those surface learners do well. But immediately after they have completed that task, completed that particular semester, they will delete, because they need to have more rooms for the next semester, for the coming semester, more rooms for information for the coming semester. So what we are trying to say here is, until and unless they see the relevance of learning, until and unless they see the connection between what they are learning to the real world context, it's difficult for them to move it to the deep learning approach, where it's a required, if they want that learning to last long, to last longer. So if you want the learning to last longer, you need to ensure that the course design, the teaching methods that you use, having known students' learning style and everything, the way in which you design your course is helping them to take the deep learning approach strategies. That will ensure not only they do well in their exam, but it will last longer. And this is I know it's an old study in 2004, but this is done in University of Oxford. And University of Oxford, you and I know that it's basically more related to deep learning, right? It's not only is basically one-to-one in terms of their teaching and learning. So there are lots of, how should I say, in-depth discussion probably between the lecturer and the students, so much so that they encourage a deep learning approach. So, and they have made a study and showed that when students there is a correlation between degree class and deep approach, where students who take the deep approach learning, deep learning approach, chances are they graduate, not chances are, there's a correlation between that and completing their program with a first-class honors. Whereas if they take the surface approach scale, that means they're just regurgitating information without truly understanding and making connection to the real world, chances are they will complete their program with third class, as shown here. And these are the perception and the approaches, the perceptions related to appropriateness of the workload. So if they think the workload is appropriate, they will take the deep approach style. If it's not, chances are they will take the surface approach. That's why it's negative here. If it's clear goals, they will take the deep approach. If not, it's surface approach. Good teaching, they see that it's good teaching. Good teaching here doesn't mean good lecture, yeah? Good teaching means you design your class that makes them understand better. So that's if they perceive that, then the chances are they will take the deep learning approach and appropriate assessment. So if they don't see all this, then very likely that they take the surface learning approach. Yes, Shamsuddin Abdullah.
Assalamualaikum, Prof. Just one question. You just now mentioned about the linear explanation here, whereby if they think that the workload is reasonable, they will take that. My question here is, can it be the other way around as well? Meaning to say that if students they take a deep learning approach to that course, they will perceive that the workload is reasonable. Because why? Because they are enjoying the learning itself there, so they don't feel like a burden if they are given tasks or what. Can that work like that? Thank you.
Sorry, I missed the second part. Can they be, what was that? Can they be?
Okay, so just now you explained about how if they perceive appropriate workload, they will take a deep approach. Okay, my question is whether the other way around works as well or not. Meaning to say that if the student is already engaged in deep learning, okay, will they have a higher chance of perceiving that the workload is appropriate? Because why? They enjoy the learning, they find the learning meaningful, so they don't feel like a burden if they are given a lot of work and stuff like that. Allahu Alam.
Possible. You remember, it's all related to motivation as well. So when they like something, they don't mind to take the extra mile to learn as well. So they feel when they're already taking that approach of learning. So yeah, the workload that they have seems to be appropriate. But this is what I'm saying. Well, the research that shows here is basically the appropriateness of workload, meaning it's not too much for anyone to handle. That means if it's if you design in such a manner that you take into consideration the student learning time. Remember, now with all the OBE, we do have the student learning time to take into consideration, right? So after taking into consideration the student learning time, what we want is actually minimally, this will be the workload that will be associated to the student learning time and associated and related to the learning outcome. Now, if I understood you well, students who are already deep learners, they've already taken the deep learning approach. They like your they like the program. They like your course because they can see you're making a connection and all that. They like what they are doing in the classroom, because whatever that you allow them to do helps them to see the connection between what they do in the classroom and what they're going to see outside in the real world context. This kind of students don't mind doing more. You ask them minimally to do the course, you just need to read 10 articles. They don't mind reading 20. That's what I mean. So the feeling of appropriate workload for them, they don't mind doing more because they like your program. They want to know more. So here, appropriate workload here is basically if you were to design for everybody, regardless whether they're already deep learners or surface learners, for everyone, we will take into consideration the student learning time, the learning outcomes and all that. That's when if you give too much, chances are students who cannot cope will take the surface approach. But students who are able to cope will take the deep approach. Is that clear, Shamsuddin?
Yes, thank you very much. Also, another question. Okay, based on this study, right? This perception is it done on the perception of students or particularly expert? Like, for example, like appropriateness of assessment, is it judged by the student whether the assessment appropriate, or is judged by a certain expert or what?
No, student.
Student.
Perception. So they feel that the assessment is appropriate, and never think that the students don't know. Yeah. I was one of, before how shall I say? Before this, I was the director of University Teaching Learning Center in UUM, and we had to do this student evaluation. We always think that students don't know what they're doing in the, don't know what they're doing in the classroom. They don't know what's outcome-based education. They don't know anything. But in actual fact, they do, You know how they evaluate the lecturers. They actually say the lecturers are not, the assessment given is not related to the course learning outcome. Can you imagine that? So that means something that we have done. Then I realized, how is it that the students know about this course learning outcome and all that? It's because we do this during the pandemic. We do this like this. We do this training via online and we put it in public, right? Everybody gets to see everything. And the students who are keen to know what are the lecturers up to, So how do they, what is it that they're just curious, so they just want to find out. And these are the very students who actually come in because they know they expect something out of this learning experiences, that they have invested their money and potential debt in the future, to be in this institution of higher learning, and they expect the lecturers to know what they're doing. So never think that the students don't know whether this assessment is appropriate. They do, because they know they are at the mercy of everything. Okay.
Okay,
but at the same time, how qualified are they to assess our, the appropriateness of the material or the assessment they use? That's also the question. Are they now, that knowledgeable?
Yeah. They wouldn't know the fact that they say that the assessment is not related to the course learning outcome. That's already an indicator. So what we did was, based on that student evaluation, we actually went back to the course and the course course assessment plan, and to a certain extent the student is right, because one was asking students to do to describe, or is it to apply, but the assessment was to create. So they do understand. There is not many, I wouldn't say that everybody understand about the appropriate assessment, but the fact that the student, particular student who said that the course assessment is not related to the course learning outcome is valid. I thought I heard a few voices just now.
There is a question, Prof, in the chat.
Yeah.
Lecturer also needs time to learn and prepare new things for the courses, but can't focus much because there'll be many events, etc. to attend or handle in between. How do you do it? Do you prepare the course for all type of learners?
Nurul, Liana, this is the best question I've ever got thus far. And this is the most crucial bit. Now that you understand your learners and you know that you need to prepare this and that and whatever, it's actually preparing learning activities and preparing your lessons is actually very, very crucial. Needs time. I'll talk about it when we reach the third section, but to give you an overview, yeah, if there are deans and deputy deans in here, I'd like to challenge you that you take away all your stuff. I don't know. I think I've already given a few institutions some ideas to play kutu lah. Play kutu here means like every month put $10 aside. And every time before the semester begins, the yearly semester begins, if you know what you're going to be teaching, go somewhere nice, do team building plus trying to plan students activities. Of course, you wouldn't know who your students are, but if you plan in such a manner that you consider all types of students, all types of learners, which means you, from that one particular activity, it will benefit the ones who are visual, the ones who are auditory, and the one who's kinesthetic. You know, that's good enough. So if you happen to have more of the kinesthetic, then you know, okay, I'll just need to give more hands-on activities. You know, so that's the only thing that you can provide after meeting your students. But even you can already plan for activities that would cater for all the three three learning styles. Yeah. Why is team building a great idea? Because we are living in the 21st century where we seems to propagate the idea that collaborative learning is the way forward and teamwork is the way forward, but lecturers don't collaborate and team, you know, and do teamwork. We do everything on our own. We never like to share. So I don't think that's nice. I think we need to walk the talk. So that's why collaborative learning must happen or must begin with us, where we sit down and we brainstorm and start sharing and present and fine-tune before we actually meet our students. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, when I say team building, it was for the lecturers. If you have time, you can do for the students. Alamak, what did I do? What did I do? No. Yeah. Well, this is the Malaysian study, which Prof. Rosna and others did in 2012. And it shows that workload and surface learning, it actually supports the notion of workload and surface learning, that if workload is just too much, then it will, there is a relationship between that and surface learning approaches. So what are the factors that affecting surface approach learning? Curriculum, excessive amount of content, too much, too little. Yeah, you need to consider. Activities, lack of interest in or background knowledge of the subject. Method, in terms of assessment methods that create undue anxiety, especially when regurgitating facts for examination purposes. So it's basically exam. This is for the exam, and you're just focusing on exam. So chances are your students will be very anxious, and when they are anxious, they just fall back on the notion of becoming surface learners just to memorize. Assessment method emphasizing recall or application of trivial procedural knowledge. And if there are no feedback, so they don't know whether they are on the right track or not. So again, playing trial and error here, they will go back to surface approach of learning. Whereas factors that affect deep learning approach, as you rightly point, I think like what was it, Shamsuddin, right? Who said that if you have active, if you promote active learning methodology, chances are your students will they love it. They love your class because they're already deep learners, and you have active learning methods and all that. That will also prolong and encourage the deep learning approach. So teaching methods that foster active and long-term engagement with learning tasks will help them to become deep approach learners. Activities, stimulating and considerate teaching through well-planned learning activities demonstrate learners' personal commitment to the subject matter, stresses its meaning and relevance to students. And this is where I think the discussion about we need time to plan for this to really happen. And I'm suggesting that maybe you should have a time off for all faculty members to sit down and work together in order to create good learning activities. Management create interest in and background knowledge of the subject matter can be done if empowering students to learn through student-centered learning. I think in order for you to make your students become engaged in learning, you need to become engaged in teaching as well. You need to have that passionate. And I'm not worried about UIAM, I think, because passionate was the biggest word that we had earlier. So you already have the DNA to make your students love your course and your program. All you need to do is just to make sure that your activities and your teaching methods is aligned to your learning outcome, and above all, feedback and expectation. You need to clearly share your expectation as well as provide feedback to your students. And that's why I'm suggesting don't just focus on summative assessment, also focus on formative assessment in your classroom so that students are able to see where they are, whether they are, whatever misconceptions that they have can be addressed in your class. Yeah. So I think this is just the same. Do you need a coffee break? Or you can continue. I'm giving an option.
Coffee break, Prof.
Okay. Please have your coffee break. It's just too much.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay.
10 minutes, Prof? 10 minutes.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Okay, then we resume inshallah at 11:40.
Yeah.
Assalamualaikum.
Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good coffee break. I wish I could. I'm not well, so I can't drink coffee at the moment. Right. Okay, now that we've talked about how we want our students to become engaged in our classroom, and we want our students to move from the surface approach to the deep learning approach so that they will be able to appreciate what they learn and can remember what they have learned longer. The next thing that we need to do is actually to also encourage our students to become autonomous. Okay. I don't know whether you can see this. Are you able to see? You just problem with me and this thingy is the fact that, okay. Right. So how do we encourage our students to become autonomous? What should learners do? Well, it is autonomous learning is where it is an approach to learning with which learners hold the power or right to regulate and control their own learning activities. It would be brilliant, isn't it, if we don't have to tell our students what to do and they take the ownership of learning and they know what they need to do. So basically, helping our students to become autonomous is actually helping them to take charge of their own learning, and in so doing, they become autonomous. And why do we need to encourage autonomous learning? Well, more autonomous forms of learning and motivation versus control will lead to an enhancement of students' engagement, learning, and wellness. Meaning, if we allow our students to take control of their own learning. They take charge of their own learning. They become motivated. They will become engaged and they will understand what they need to do, right? So how can we as instructors support this? Well, we as instructors, we can support student autonomy by attempting to understand, acknowledge where possible, be responsive to students' perspectives. That's why being empathetic is very important. Understanding where our students come from is actually important. And they also try to provide opportunities for students to take ownership. So making students take charge of their own learning, make them decide what they need to do, and have them justify why they do it that way. Is encouraging students to become autonomous, and of course an initiative of their schoolwork, providing them with meaningful choices, tasks that can engage their interest. So this is why how instructors can actually help to promote autonomous learning. Right. Okay. Self-directed learning is related to autonomous learning, where when they become autonomous, they are also able to direct themselves to learn. So I'm sure some of you have actually seen this word, right? Self-directed learning. It is a process in which individuals take the initiative with or without the help from others in diagnosing their learning needs, formulating goals, identifying human and material resources, choosing, implementing appropriate learning strategies, and evaluating learning outcomes. Now, basically, if you are teaching your students to plan, to evaluate, to monitor their learning, to and encouraging them to see how they can actually improve, you are promoting self-directed learning. Self-directed learning enables individuals to take control of their learning by deciding what and how to learn with or without the support of others, and an important goal for improving the quality of student learning and preparing students for the future. I think if those of you who have actually done MOOC, massive open online courses, where personalized learning environment is actually important, requires students to become self-directed learners. Because if students are not self-directed learners, they will be lost in the whole entire MOOC, because they would not know where to begin. But because they're so used to seeing the lecturer week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4 until the end of the semester. Whereas if it's in a MOOC base, perhaps it is designed in a modular base, so they need to have their own initiatives to direct themselves to become autonomous in fulfilling the requirement of the modules in order to complete the course. So that's why MOOC is not meant for everyone. I've written an article on that and presented in one of the seminar, Inspirational Scholars Symposium. Is MOOC for everyone? Well, based on my research, no, it's not for everyone. It's only meant for those who are self-directed learners. They are very goal-oriented. They know what they want to know, and they want to learn it in a personalized way, where they don't need people to tell them what to do. They take charge of their own learning. That's why SDL enables individuals to take control of the learning by deciding what and how to learn with or without the support of others. So by designing in such a way that it's modular based, and they can go from one module to the other module at any point of time, because it depends on their mood and their personal preference. So it allows them to thrive in that self-directed manner. Whereas certain students who need guidance probably will not survive, and they are the ones who slowly but surely we need to move them from being guided to learn to take charge of their own learning step by step. Yeah. So how do you move towards self-directed learning? As I have mentioned from morning, collaboration and challenge. That's an error there. even in virtual setting, you need to challenge them. Challenge students means you give them problems to solve. Collaborate means they solve it in groups. And when they see other people, how they solve the problem, it helps them to see how those problems can be solved in a different way. And that provides them with an armada of ways to solve problems. And that will help give them the how shall I say, the fervor, yeah, to solve problems on their own in the future. So starts with solving problems together to solving problems on their own in the future. And I think, I'm sure all of you have actually seen this growth mindset and fixed mindset. And I think it's about time we also encourage growth mindset in our classroom, where we appreciate students, and we know that they have the capacity to learn. They can expand their capacity to learn. All they need to do is just to put effort, and effort will lead to mastery, and failures is just a learning process. That means making mistakes is part of the learning process, and feedback is an opportunity to learn, and challenges is actually a way in which you can transform one level to the next level. Whereas fixed mindset, if the environment is actually a fixed mindset environment, you tend to feel that we can't do anything more than just teach, because the students are like that. So if you do that, that means you're giving up. And you don't like to give feedback or receive feedback, because it's part of your, if you see as criticism. Coming back to the student evaluation, some people don't take that student evaluation seriously in the sense that they don't like to listen or to read criticism on themselves. They feel that they are all okay, while others thrive on those criticism by their students, even though it's negative, or of course they would appreciate if it's a lot more positive. But even if it's negative, it's a learning process. It's a learning process for them to actually step back and see whether is there any truth in this. If there is, then I need to make a change. Because I'm a human being. I tend to have errors, and I'd like to make amends to all the errors that I have. So people who have a fixed mindset, they don't like all that. They believe that intelligence is already static. There's nothing more that you can do if your students are not clever. And that's the reason why in schools especially, though I don't really like what's happening, but then you tend to see people stream students in different classes, although they say they don't stream it. But you and I know that the last class will be the ones who probably will be the low achievers. And chances are the teachers who go into the classroom who believe in this fixed mindset will not even teach the students. They will just do classroom management, because they feel that they don't have to waste their time. The students are hopeless. Their future is rather bleak. And that's where, for these students, going to school is a pushing factor rather than a pulling factor. So we don't want this fixed mindset in our classroom, so that our students will learn to become better, every day. As William says, to be a great teacher, you must love your subject, love your students, and be utterly determined that they shall learn, no matter how low or high their intelligence are, or their CPU is, they are able to expand their capacity to learn. When we teach, there are 3 levels of thinking about teaching. So some people believe that it's the students that needs to be blamed. Nothing, I cannot, I have tried my best, but it's the students, it's what the students are, they are either good students or bad students. So that's the first level. The second level is what the teacher does. I did this, I did that. I remember having to observe one student lecturer he was a new lecturer teaching her class, which is called Mathematics for Management or something like that. That's a killer subject, by the way. Most of them enter to fail. And she knew that she was going to fail in my in that session, because I'm the one who's actually going to supervise her. And she thought that supervising her will be reflected by how her students perform. So she was crying because she tried her level best to use case study in making sure in making the connection between that formula to the real world section. For example, that particular formula is good for inventory, so she showed how it can be applied in when doing inventory. Unfortunately, right after that, when she was able to show where it is used, she was the one who actually helped them to answer the question. So at the end of the day, when the students sat for the exam, naturally the students didn't do well, because all this while it was the teacher who actually solved the problem. So we turned the table around. Well, that's where we sat down and we discussed about it. And I asked her, why don't we have two papers? One paper is for you, because again, it was a large class. One paper for them to write down as big as possible the answer, and the other one is for them to do the calculation. And that's what she did. And I told her, the day that you have with the boys at the end, the last bench, getting it right, call them to the front. And that's what she did. And the boy came to the front and showed, because we had a visualizer, right? So they can actually show their way of solving the problem. But his writing was just too small that even zooming to the highest level the students cannot see his writing. So he had to write again. And while he was rewriting his solution, he missed a point, and the whole class became chaos because they were asking questions. And in this time, the good students, I mean, the one who were able to understand what's going on, was clarifying, was actually correcting him. The ones who didn't understand asked him to hold on and explain again. And so it was very noisy, and it was difficult for him to control the class. And at the end of the whole session, after they completed that session and everybody knew how to solve the problem, he turned around and he said to the teacher, "I'm sorry." And the teacher said, "Why?" This is the first time this is the first time I know how difficult it is to become a teacher. And the reason why he said, "I'm sorry," is because I know, because I was sitting right behind him, he was not paying attention when she was teaching most of the time. They were passing food and whatever, you know, they were not really paying attention. So the teacher was not at fault, but she was trying her level best, but she was still transmitting the information. The students were also transmitting information when you know about the student, you know, who the students are. So what you need to do is actually to focus on what the students does. So that's where the active learning comes in, and that's where you support learning. And because the ultimate aim of learning is actually to win the hearts and mind to change. And when we say hearts and mind, will be the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. And I've actually highlighted the C, the A, and the B. The C, the A, and B is actually related also to the learning, engagement, and motivation. Remember, we're trying to change their mental aspects, their emotional aspects, as well as their behavior. So what we want is actually to create the intellectual being, to enrich the soul, so that they become contributing citizens. So when designing the learning activities, what we need to do is we've got to look at the learning outcome. And of course, the first thing is to understand the students. Oh, what did I do? Right? The course learning outcomes, the skills that comes with it, the learning cluster, the topics, as well as understanding the students. I'm going to give you just a snippet. I know I've got about 5 seconds left, 4 minutes left. This is an example of a UG and a undergraduate and a postgraduate course. Undergraduate is Islamic marketing, where the instructor used Web 2.0 tools to break the social barriers. The Web 2.0 tools, as we mentioned just now, it helps those who are introverts as well, you know, and in this case, in the Islamic marketing class, all the girls and the boys were not sitting to each other. They don't talk to each other. So the Web 2.0 tools is actually helping them to break those social barriers in a Sharia compliant way. And service learning, what she did was, the reason why she had to do this, breaking the social barriers, because she was going to introduce service learning. Service learn, I think all of you are familiar with service learning, right? So basically, she wanted to make sure that that particular project was about halal management. I think she was asking the students to help the proprietors of the cafe in the university to get the halal certification. And in the process also teach them about halal management and halal, and what was it, another, I can't remember what's the halalan and toiban, yes. And the proprietor will provide them with the skill, opportunities for them to improve the skills, and the skills were basically interpersonal skills, and that's the reason why she uses Web 2.0 tools to break the social barrier. And when they were doing service learning, what they did was they reflected on their experiences. They become autonomous because they have to decide how, when to talk to the proprietors. Applicability is when they are able to see the connection between what they're learning in terms of halal and tayyiban to the real world context. And the thing that helped them to understand was better, or maybe change them, was when they asked the people who the customers whether or not they feel that they are, they feel comfortable eating in that place, and all of them say yeah, because it's a Muslim proprietor, so everything will be fine. But when they check when they followed the regulation, they don't necessarily comply to the halal and tayyiban strategies, the characteristics. So that the learning trajectory became from just doing it for the sake of the course, to now realize that I am a potential halal executive. I need to now educate the society about how important it is to find a place where you want to eat with the halal jakim, compliance. And they understood their role to educate the community so much that initially they had problems to communicate, not only with their friends of the opposite sex, also definitely to the people who are totally strangers, that means the proprietors. But because they understood what's going on, and they now can see the relevance of doing things, doing that, they felt a surge of urgency. The class has ended, at that time. They told the lecturer, can I now speak to the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs? Because the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs are the ones who's taking charge of all the proprietors in the university. So they presented their findings to the TNC HEPA for him to consider making sure that halal and tayyiban can be done, the Jakim halal logo and certification can be done for all the proprietors in the university. So that's where the motivation comes in, the relevance comes in, gaining new experience, and the orientation of learning to become autonomous is there. They're no longer looking at the course, but they're now looking at beyond the course and finding relevance. And for the postgraduate, learning about social culture theory is not easy. So make them understand, to make it simple and relevant. I asked them the lecturer asked them to look at the movie to make the learning of the theory manageable. That will help them to gain the experience and the relevance, and that will help them in terms of, and then after that, they need to do the mini project. Now creating their own case study, conducting the research, the mini project. So that helps them to see the relevance of the theory, the orientation of their learning and the applicability, and understanding their roles to make a difference to their students' learning when they see the transformation of their students, opportunities for their students to expand the students' capacity to learn, help them to become motivated to learn that themselves. And that also provides them with the new experiences. Okay, I think I am going to end here. And any questions?
Perhaps we can have 2 questions because we are now
12. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Any 2 questions from the Zoom audience? Okay. All right. Yeah, I take it as no questions. It's okay. Thank you, Prof. Dr. Fauziah Binti Abdul Rahim, for the very insightful and fruitful session regarding teaching, learning for different styles. Okay, we have gained a lot of knowledge today, especially on the surface learning, deep learning, and then about the experiential learning, about the blended learning, active learning, etc. Thank you very much, Prof. All right. So I think we can end the session. Do not go yet. Thank you everyone for your participation in this training. We hope to see you again next time, inshallah. And I am as your moderator today. I apologize for any shortcomings. Let's end with Tasbih Kafara Suratul As. Alhamdulillah. All right, so now we go for the final activity, which is the photo session. Okay, please turn on your camera. Okay, right. I'm going to take it screen by screen. I'm going to announce. Okay. So now we go for the first screen. There are 8 screens. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Try again. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Sorry, first screen again because the chat is always popping up. Okay, right. Now I have the clear one. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Okay. Next screen, screen number 2. 1, 2, 3. Smiles. Next screen. 1, 2, 3. Smiles. The fourth screen. 1, 2. Sorry, there's a chat. Let me just give it again. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Again, I have to remove the second. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Screen number 5. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Screen number 6. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Screen number 7. 1, 2, 3. Smile. And the last one. 1, 2, 3. Alhamdulillah. So I hope we can see you again in our future training. And thank you so much again to Prof. Dr. Fauziah Binti Abdul Rahim from Jazakallah khairan for all the knowledge, and also to everybody who joined this CPD training. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Prof. This was a wonderful session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you everybody. Alhamdulillah, and sorry for not feeling well. And
okay, you're doing great.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum.
Get well soon, Prof.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.